Alrighty, everyone. So, bear with me. I'm figuring out how to do an Instagram live literally right now. Starting a live video. So, let's just go. Hi, I'm Alex, as you probably know by now. I'm from Lost with Purpose. Hello, hi. And I'm having a live question and answer session right now sponsored by Eagle Creek, and they're currently on a campaign to encourage people to quit their job, find their unknown, do whatever it takes to just live their life the way that they want to and be a bit bolder and travel a lot more. And so basically over the last few days I've been collecting questions from you guys about my process of quitting my job to travel the world. And let's just give a little backstory right now. Basically, I quit my job to travel in 2016. That was in February. I was always kind of interested in traveling. I grew up in a very global household. My father's from England, my mother's from the Philippines. My brother and I kind of grew up with an international perspective on the world. Traveling was always a priority for my family, so let's just say I got the travel bug real young. And so when I started to get older, maybe 17 or 18, I really wanted to take a gap year and go traveling the world and see what happens. And my parents said, hell no. They said that if I took a gap year, I would probably never come back, which, to be fair, they were probably right. And so after high school, I went to college. I did a semester abroad, which was really helpful. I went to Thailand in my junior year of college. That was 2012. You can figure out how old I am now. And during that semester abroad, basically I was meeting people who were traveling for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, years even, and that just blew my mind. I didn't know that was a thing. And so after that semester abroad, it was okay, I need to travel the world. How can I do that? I don't know. So after college, I started to travel. I basically moved to the Netherlands and lived there for 3 years, and that was a whole new experience, living in a different culture and kind of seeing another part of the world. But even then, I still wanted to travel more. So after 1 or 2 years, I was really starting to get itchy feet again, and decided that I was going to go on the long trip that I always wanted to go on. Who's going to stop me at this point? I'm an adult and I can do what I want. And so I started to save money, I started to save money and live as cheaply as possible. I basically ate chickpeas and rice for a year. I stopped going out, I stopped spending so much money, I started taking on more freelance work. At the time I was working as a user experience designer for a startup in Amsterdam that's basically designing apps and websites so that they're as usable as possible. And I was doing freelance work on the side, doing graphic design, building some websites sometimes. There's websites where you can be paid to test apps and tell people why they do or do not suck, which was easy and a fun way to make some side money. But basically, in short, I wasn't making crazy amounts of corporate cash monies like the people you read about online who are I was working as a finance person and making $200,000 a year and quit. No, dude, that's not me at all. I was making okay money, but not a whole lot. But because I made travel a priority, because I started kind of putting money away the second I got it, I calculated how much I could put away when I got my paychecks, put it off to the side, saved, done. And so by doing that and living cheaply and not spending too much for more than a year, really, I managed to save up some money. And after about a year of really active, cheaply living and saving, I had enough money to travel. And so, as you all know, after that, as some of you know, after that, I got a plane ticket, and my first destination was Tbilisi, Georgia. Oh no, I should probably backtrack. Hang on a second. Let me backtrack here. As you can see, I'm very organized. In the process of saving, since you all should know what actually goes into this, maybe 2 or 3 months out, I really started to facilitate the stuff that I had to do to quit my job. So that involves, I had to tell my boss that I was leaving. Luckily, he took it super well. Cheers, Mark, if you ever see this. 2 or 3 months ahead of time, I told him I was planning to leave and travel the world. I had to sell all my stuff, which took longer than I thought it would, just because you have to be very coordinated in what you sell when. Like, you can't sell a bed 3 months ahead of time, or else you'll just be sleeping on the floor for the next 3 months. So I sold all my stuff through a variety of, like, online marketplaces. I sold some clothes at a flea market. I gave stuff away to people who I liked, that kind of stuff. I had to cancel my house renting or my apartment renting contract. I had to do stuff like deregistering from the Netherlands and the municipality that I lived in. What else did I have to do? I had to look into vaccinations and I only had to get a couple because I traveled a lot before this, so I had a lot of vaccinations. And as most of you know, the hardest part is getting all your visas ahead of time. So that meant doing loads and loads of paperwork, filling out a bunch of forms, printing out a million versions of those little photos, which never happen to be right whenever you take them in. And yeah, paying fees and stuff like that. So there was a lot of preparation that kind of went into the process of quitting my job to travel the world. It definitely took months to orchestrate. But come February 2016, I got on a plane to Tbilisi, Georgia, and began my trip that's basically been going on. I haven't had a home for the last 3 years. It might actually be like the anniversary date a few days ago that I left. But yeah, since I've left, in case you don't know, I've been to Georgia, Armenia, Iran, Pakistan for the first time, China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, India, all over the place. After that, I guess Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan again. I've been to Brazil and Colombia last summer, and I've been in the U.S. now, as you guys have seen over the last few days. So, yeah, that's a little bit of backstory to everything that's been going on. And now I guess I can get to the questions that you all have, because I did get some excellent questions over the last few days. I've kind of like consolidated all of the questions, and the really repetitive ones, or not really repetitive, the ones that I got a few times I kind of mashed together, and the ones that weren't directly related to quitting your job to travel, I'll answer those in the Instagram comments, so no worries. Question number 1. Samantha asks, did you have a plan if you came back, or did you set off back in 2016 knowing you would do whatever it took to continue indefinitely? Good question. I totally had no idea this would keep on going as long as it did. My intention was to travel for basically a year. I'd saved about 12,000 euros, and I assumed I'd be spending 1,000 euros a month, and I didn't. It lasted much longer than I thought it would. Oh, also all the people asking me to save the video, don't worry, I will. I'll share it on my social media somehow, never fear. I thought I would travel for about a year, and so my intention was to kind of go until the money started to get a little bit dangerously low. The buffer that I set for myself was 3,000 euros. Once I got to only having 3,000 euros left in my bank account, I had to do something to make money. And my hope was that I would be able to find a job somewhere down the road. Maybe it would be online or in another country. I have faith in the world to just, provide something for me somehow. Things usually work themselves out in the end. But the money stretched longer than I thought it would, and I started blogging, and blogging has since become barely lucrative enough for me to carry on and keep on traveling the way that I have been, so that's been super cool. Oh, I also, before leaving, got a certificate to teach English. Admittedly, I would probably die if I had to teach English because I'm very awkward and cannot imagine teaching English to people for hours every day. But that was a backup plan. Second question from Karen. Excuse the French, but how did you get the balls to make the decision and quit? I feel like 90% of it starts with courage. It's true. It takes a little bit of courage to just kind of say, no, screw this, I'm going to go off and find my unknown and do my own thing and leave conventional life behind. Luckily, that was always a priority for me. I always knew that I wanted to go on some kind of big trip. I wasn't aware until relatively recently that you could just quit your job and go do other things in the world that weren't just having 2.5 children and a dog. But yeah, it just took a lot of courage and realizing that I wanted to do X, so I had to do Y. And I wanted to travel, so I had to quit my job and find another way to sustain myself on the road. So I did. Next question is from Savita. So, what was the turning point for you when you decided to quit your job, or the one thing that made the decision for you? Like I just said, I realized that quitting my job was the way to find the most freedom to travel the way that I want to, which was very extensively for an extended period of time. And so deciding to actually quit my job came when I had enough money to travel, so I had about 10,000 euros saved up at that time. And I knew that I wanted to go to Iran. That was the first country. It was like, yes, this one, that is where I'm going. And in Iran, the good travel season is maybe March or April, around Nowruz, the Persian New Year. And so I realized in January that I had enough money to kind of quit and go at that time. And it was like, okay, give a month or two, and then I wanted to go earlier, but it's too cold in Iran still, so I'll go to Georgia instead, because why not? Weird, stupid traveler logic that didn't make sense. By the way, I'm seeing more questions as I'm reading these, and I'll try to get to those questions at the end if I answer all these ones. I have them all on a list down here. So, patience, kids, patience. Next question is from Chrissy, which is, what's the most important lesson you learned from quitting your job and traveling the world solo? That's really tricky, because I feel like I've learned a lot of lessons, so I have to kind of figure out which one is the most important one. But I would say the most important lesson, I'm going to do two lessons. The most important lesson that I've learned, just personally, is that I have the power to do things myself. I'd never thought that I would be able to get as far as I could on my own. It was just terrifying. I didn't have any faith in myself. I thought I would just, combust or explode or be totally doomed in about 2 seconds. Time has shown that most people are pretty resourceful and you can figure things out on the fly as long as you have confidence in yourself and have faith in yourself and learn to trust other people also. But a second really important lesson that I've learned in the last few years is that what I'm doing right now, like quitting my job to travel the world and kind of live online nomadic existence, is that it does require privilege to do this kind of thing. Like, I come from a place of privilege. I have Western passports. I have 2 Western passports. I have a U.S. and a UK passport. I have a very supportive family who, although they don't like that I'm traveling all the time, they helped me get a good education. They helped to fund my education. They, encouraged me to travel in the first place. They are the ones who exposed me to this world. I had a good education, which gave me a lot of skills that I can apply in lots of different fields, and that's very important because then I know that I have very useful skills to fall back on. I'm a native English speaker. Yeah, so all of these things come together and give me a sort of social safety net for me to pursue this dream, because if I fail, I have relative confidence that there is somewhere in this world that I can come back to and find a job, whatever back to is at this point. But yeah, I know that I have people who will help me if something really goes bad, and I know that I have the skills that I need to come back and find a job in a variety of places. And so, yeah, quitting your job to travel the world is a wonderful thing that I think people should try if they're interested in, but it definitely requires some privilege or a lot of planning, so it's not necessarily as easy as some people make it out to be. So, as I say all these things, just remember that I don't think that it's totally possible for everyone. I'm not saying that everyone has to do it. It's okay, you can live a good life if you don't quit your job too. But I do want to encourage the people who are interested in it to at least give it a try. Just saying. Soapbox rant over. Next question. From Samantha, is there any advice that you wish you had or things that you wish you'd brought for those of us looking to do the same? Good question. So one of the most important things I've learned through trial and error is the importance of investing in quality travel gear before you go traveling. You can get the crappy backpack because it's super cheap, and you can get the cheap and nasty hiking pants or boots or whatever. All of that stuff is going to fall apart on you if you travel in it long enough. I know, because I've had backpacks fall apart. And so that's the importance of investing in quality gear from brands like Eagle Creek. Check out this, super swanky backpack that they done sent me the other day. So, having quality travel gear like this stuff that you know won't break on you somewhere down the line is very, very important, because when you're traveling in countries that don't necessarily have the same kind of infrastructure or quality of materials as people in the West might be used to, it's really, really difficult to replace stuff on the roads. There was a point where my backpack broke in the mountains in Pakistan. One of the buckles on my backpack just like snapped. And so I was literally just standing there with this super heavy big clothing backpack just on one shoulder, kind of hobbling, and I ended up having to like tie it together. I like got some string and a carabiner and somehow managed to like thread things together, but just I couldn't get the backpack fixed for months because I didn't have access to these things. So definitely, before you go, invest in super useful stuff, like high quality, useful things like a good backpack, good shoes, one good solid set of clothing that you know will not disintegrate on you immediately. Stuff like a SteriPen to sterilize your water without having to like constantly buy new tablets and things like that. A nice power bank so you can charge all your things that won't eventually melt on you like some of them do, things like that. Yeah. Next question is from someone on Instagram whose handle I cannot pronounce. How much do you have to save on average for a month of travel and know that no money issues will come up? You never know that no money issues will come up, first of all. This is why you always have like an emergency savings fund thing. Like I said, mine was $3,000 or 3,000 euros. I always have that there because in case something happens, say my arm falls off, or like I need to quickly fly somewhere for my safety or whatever, then I know I have the money. But aside from that, I personally set aside $1,000 a month in the beginning. $1,000 a month was how much I allocated for myself to be able to kind of travel and spend a little bit more every once in a while without having to worry too much. In practice, I probably spend at this point between $400 and $500 a month in places like India and Pakistan because they're relatively cheap to travel in. I can stay at people's houses more often. It's easy to do stuff like hitchhiking, and food is super cheap. I spend like 50 rupees on food most of the time. But it's very dependent on where in the world you're traveling. So for example, I try to stick to $15 a day or less in places like India and Pakistan, but in more expensive places like, I don't know, say Thailand or Kazakhstan, there I have to allocate a little bit more, say like $25 a day. And that's doing things on a budget. That's staying in hostels, that's getting the cheapest, crappiest train or car, whatever you can get. That's eating cheap food where possible, like I'll eat a lot of street food, or I'll eat like bread as my main source of nutrition, which is not nutritious for the record, don't do that. And if you wanted to travel in places like Europe or the United States, then I would recommend having at least like $50 to $100 a day, just so that you're able to go out and do things without having to like stare at every single penny and wonder how soon you're going to be broke. Yeah, so it's very dependent on where you want to travel. I personally cannot really afford to travel in Europe or travel extensively in the US just yet, but one day I'll get there when I'm rich and famous. Haha, that's never going to happen. Oh, also another interesting point is that though that might seem like a lot, or it might seem very overwhelming thinking about how much money you have to save for travel, travel doesn't have to be super expensive. It still requires money. It definitely requires money. Don't ever travel without money. It's like you're just leeching off society at that point. But you can do stuff like hitchhiking, and that'll save you money on transportation. If you have a tent, you can camp pretty much anywhere as long as you're crafty about where you're hiding your tent. You can couch surf in cities. I do that a lot to save money. Not necessarily couch surfing, but I stay with people to save on accommodation. In more expensive places for food, you can cook your own food. You can just live off like pasta if you want. I see a lot of people living off like pasta and oatmeal and bananas, and that saves them money. And also, most importantly, travel to places that are more affordable. A lot of people have this notion that if you want to travel, you have to go to Paris and buy expensive stuff and like buy fancy drinks on the beaches of Barcelona. Like, no, dude, you don't have to go there. They're expensive. Why would you want to go there anyway? There's so many cheaper places in the world to travel in, like Eastern Europe or South Asia or parts of Central America. If you don't have the money to go to Europe, go to those other places. It's fine. It's probably more interesting because your money stretches further and it's more adventurous. So, Oh, I see someone said, when will you buy a mule so you can ride around to save money? That would be fantastic. You can do that with me. That would be fun. Um, Next question. How do you finance your... Oh, Anisha says, how do you finance your travels? And Kunahi says, how do you earn more for traveling if you quit your job? It's like basically the same question. At this point, I finance my travels through a mixture of money from blogging. So I make maybe $500 to $1,000 a month through my blog, through like advertisement or sponsored content, stuff like this, selling photos sometimes. And I also still freelance from time to time when the opportunity arises. So sometimes I'll build websites. That's generally more profitable. Sometimes I still do design work, like graphic design work. I've translated some stuff in the last few years. So when opportunities arise and I have the internet and the time to do so, I'll make money that way. Yeah, but it took time, like, a note for that is that I had some of the clients who are asking me for work now came from before I started traveling. It wasn't I just like found stuff online while traveling. These are relationships that I'd already crafted before I started traveling, and the blog, as I've said in a few posts, was a lot of work. It took a lot of time to bring to this point. Yeah, it's been like 3 years and I'm still making under the poverty line with my blog, so just know that it takes time, it takes a lot of time investment, and it's not something you can just fall into super easily. And if you don't necessarily have blogging skills or design skills or specific internet skills, there's still other things that you can do while traveling that aren't online. Some people do stuff like working in hostels. There's programs called Workaway where you can usually you at least get to live somewhere without having to pay anything. You can live there and they'll give you food in exchange for some kind of work. Some of them actually pay you depending on what it is. Some people make money like transporting goods across borders and not just like drugs. That sounds really sketchy, doesn't it? Although that would make you money too, but don't do that. But there's services like Grabber, Grabr, where you can, if you're flying from, say, the United States to India, people will say like, hey, I want a drone. Can you please bring me a drone and I'll give you money once you come here? And so some people will fill up entire bags of stuff and then transport it to other countries and make money that way by bringing the stuff overseas and helping people like avoid the overseas shipping taxes and stuff like that. So if you kind of Google around, you can find a lot of weird things on the internet to make money. Next question. What do you wish you knew then when I quit my job that you know now? Yeah, two things. One, I wish I knew that I do have the ability to figure things out and do things on my own. I was very afraid to do things on my own at the start, and I thought I always had to be around people for confidence or support or just for safety, and now I've learned that I don't. I'll totally be fine. Most of the time. I still get into trouble, but it's generally okay. I also wish that I knew that Georgia, the country, is cold in March. I didn't think about that one very much, and when I flew there, a friend had told me that it was a slightly Mediterranean climate, so I assumed that meant it would be wonderful and springy and delightful, and Georgia is actually cold AF in March. I was trekking through snow up to here at some point in, like, sweatpants and sneakers. That didn't make sense. I was very cold. I wish I knew that at the start. Next question from Azar, who says, can I travel with you? Sorry, Azar. Probably not. Maybe if we meet on the road. I am running women's tours in Pakistan. I haven't mentioned that so much, but I am still in the planning stages to run women's tours in Pakistan sometime in September or October, so Azar, I don't think you're female, but other females can join me in that way, so stay tuned. Next question from Bubali. What kind of travel insurance can you have when traveling for so long? That's a really useful question. So there's a variety of travel insurances where you can just keep on renewing every few months or every year that will cover the basics. Like, if I lose my bags, they'll pay for stuff. If I have to book a plane ticket or make a change to a plane ticket, that'll be compensated for. If I break my leg doing something stupid that isn't too extreme, it'll usually be covered. And I've had travel insurances from a variety of companies at this point for, anything spanning like 3 months to a year. I've had World Nomads, which is kind of international and Australian. Travel Guard, which is an American company. True Traveler, which is a European company. Alliance, with a Z at the end, said, covers kind of more extreme places like Afghanistan, or Iraq is covered by Alliance, I do believe. And so basically, most of the time, sometimes I get a little irresponsible, but most of the time I have some kind of travel insurance from one of those guys for maybe 6 months or a year. I've been negligent in the U.S. because it costs more if you have insurance that covers the U.S. But once I go back to Asia, which I will soon, March, I usually have travel insurance to cover things. But they don't cover things like high altitude trekking. If I did something extreme like skydiving and hurt myself, I wouldn't be covered that way. And yeah, if you have basic travel insurance like World Nomads and you go to Afghanistan, they don't cover you. I learned that the hard way. So, next question is from Brigitte, which is kind of in the same line. How do you deal with health issues, by the way? Insurance, finding a doctor or a hospital, medicine. Do you care about Western standards when looking for a hospital? The answer is it depends on how close I am to dying. If I'm really desperately sick and probably in need of some kind of injection or something like that, I will be a little bit more cautious. The only thing I'm really, really rigorous about is making sure that if someone is going to stick something into me, that's clean. Because there are definitely places in the world where people will reuse needles or just kind of like give them a little rinse and stick them into you. That's disgusting. You shouldn't do that. So most of the time, the only doctor I'll really use is Google. If I have a problem, I'll usually wait 3 or 4 days, and then if it still persists, then I'll start Googling stuff to see if I can kind of self-diagnose. And if it really, really persists, I will go to I'll try and find a clinic. I'll do a lot of Googling to figure out where clinics are, what kind of doctors I can see. If I have friends in the area, I'll ask them. And usually I will just go to a clinic to get a test done, and then whatever the test results say, I'll say, thanks, cool, and then I'll go out and buy my own medicine, because doctors in some countries really like to give you way, way, way too many drugs. So I'll usually take their test results, ignore everything that they tell me, and then Google how to treat whatever it turns out to be, and then go and buy my own medicine. And caring about Western standards, not really, it usually costs more. I did go to a Western, like an expat-oriented clinic in Afghanistan, but that was probably the closest I've come to death. I was very afraid of getting stuck with dirty needles there, and the bed was comfy. It was totally worth it, actually. I got to lie in a really comfy bed and watch The Martian. I've never been in such a blissful state on travels before. Okay, next question is from Laura, which is how to do it, travel cheaply but be safe. Questions about being safe I find kind of strange, just because many places can be dangerous, many places can be safe. It kind of depends on where you're going in certain countries, how you're conducting yourself, how you're putting yourself out there. I don't think traveling cheaply changes how safe you are. Sometimes you might stay in like really, really grimy places, but then you can tell that it's seedy and you shouldn't be there. I think it's whether you're traveling luxuriously or cheaply, the most important thing is to always make sure that you have someone that you can call, that you can rely on and trust, and learn to kind of read people. When someone is coming up to you and they're looking at you and talking and saying things, if they look seedy, if they look kind of uncomfortable and shifty, or they're looking you up and down and being really creepy, don't trust them. You're not obligated to go with anyone and do anything with someone you don't know. It's your life. You can just walk away from things. And I think that's the most important lesson that admittedly takes time to learn on the road. Next question is from Priya, which is, how do you manage to stay healthy throughout your trip? That's something I grapple with a lot. Staying healthy on the road is really quite a pain in the ass. Because traveling cheaply usually excludes healthy food, and as everyone in South Asia knows, breathing South Asian air is really quite toxic. So I just try to drink a lot of water and move around as much as possible, and then when I do have the opportunity to eat healthy food, I'll do it. if I have an opportunity to run from time to time, I'll take it, though I've learned to not run in South Asian megacities because then I'll get cancer and die, so I am still figuring that one out, Priya. Let me know if you figure anything out. Next question from Savita is, how long did your savings last during travels, and how did you transition from traveling on savings versus making money while traveling? My 12,000 euros lasted for about a year and a half. I made some more money in that year and a half from freelance jobs, and then my blog started making me enough money semi-regularly about 2 years in. So freelance job money carried me to that point, and then after that my blog has been kind of my subsistence level, and I've been making money on top of it with extra freelance jobs. So yeah, my 12,000 euros lasted about a year and a half, which was super cool. I was very satisfied. Next question from Alfanja, I think I said that right, is, did you ever have issues with self-esteem? Yeah, definitely. I'm totally not a confident person, whatever the internet may make you think. I get super nervous meeting new people, which sounds really odd because that's literally all I do all the time. But yeah, I get really nervous meeting new people. I'm afraid that they won't find me interesting or won't want to talk to me, or that I'm just boring or miserable or whatever, and I get really freaked out and flake out a lot when I have to meet new people. And I'm also afraid of asking for selfies from people, which seems really silly because I live on the internet all the time. But yeah, I'm totally terrified of asking people for photos, whether with me or without, or taking my photo with people. I met some super nice people yesterday in a cafe who recognized me, which was super cool. First time that happened in the US. And we talked for forever, and then I probably should have taken a selfie with them, but I was too terrified to ask. So even after all this time, yes, I still have self-esteem issues. The world's weird. Also, another question from the same dude was, did you experience culture shock? No. Well, sometimes the way people treat women really pisses me off. I'm not sure that it's kind of like culture shock. The most intense culture shock I've had is actually coming back to my own country, coming back to the United States and just being like, wow, this is a very different world and life from what I've been living, and it kind of felt like coming back and waking up from a dream or something, coming back to the US, and it took me months to get over that. There are still moments where I look around and it's like, this is very odd. I don't know why we do this, and I can't believe that I'm here, and this is just very curious. So yeah, I definitely get culture shock, but not from the countries I travel to. I don't know. Next question from Josh Ali is, what advice can you give someone who would love to do this but with a family? And he says that he has 2 kids under 3 years old and a wife who loves to travel. Good question. It's definitely more difficult with children. Caveat, I have no children, in case y'all didn't figure that out already. But there are people who do this with children, and some of them choose to homeschool their kids on the road. Some people, I think, a very practical solution is to look for jobs in countries overseas. That way your kids can still somewhat have some stability, but get to experience new cultures in a much more immersive way than if you're just traveling around. Look into things like house sitting so that you can have a house where your kids can live in and have a safe space and grow up. But you won't have to pay as much money, and you still get to engage in the local culture. But yeah, you should definitely at least look into homeschooling your kids on the road. There's loads of Facebook groups and forums for stuff like that, and plenty of travel bloggers who travel with their kids. So do some Googling, and also look into jobs overseas. That's my recommendation. Next question is from Nuna. What kind of freelance work can most people find online that is not a scam? Not having a degree in graphic design or those with popular websites? Good question. There are loads of ways to make money online. If you Google weird ways to make money online, you will find some really freaky things. I won't go into the freakier things. But something that I didn't know about until I started traveling was online virtual assistants, which is basically a business assistant, but you do it remotely. So that could be anything from answering emails, organizing schedules, picking out restaurants, setting up social media, just anything that business businesses might need, you can do, and you just stay in contact with them through messaging services or Skype or whatever. And so yeah, it's like being an office assistant, but online, and you can find that in so many different industries. And there are people who make like more than $100,000 a year doing stuff like that. You just have to get set up and find the right clients and be consistent and be thorough. Other things people can do, there's like freelance writing. You can be a language tutor. Not English is the easiest job to find, but there's also, you can teach pretty much any language, but you should learn how to teach before you start offering your services. There's also, you can like moderate forums to make money. That's kind of like looking over how people are communicating in forums or in message or in chat rooms and stuff like that, and if someone's being an asshole, you just tell them to stop. And stuff like editing articles, proofreading, things like that. Do some Googling. There's loads of articles about all the freaky things you can do on the internet to make money. Next question. What are the ways to support yourself while traveling? I kind of touched on this already, but aside from all the freelance stuff I just mentioned, there's also like au pairing, where you basically go and look over someone's kids in another country and live with them, and they cover your living and food, and then you get a little bit of money on top of that. That's really popular with young women who want to travel. Stuff like Workaway, where you can live for free somewhere and sometimes make money on top of that. Working as tour guides, sometimes for tourists from your country. If you speak someone's language, that's really useful. Working in hostels, the grabber thing I mentioned earlier. You can do bartending and working in hospitality. You can do niche stuff like being a yoga instructor or a scuba master. Those require skills, but it's possible. It's a way to make money online. Or not online, in person. Yeah, so again, there's a lot of things, and if you just travel, jobs often pop up in really weird places. So if you have enough savings, you can usually string yourself on long enough that something will pop up, and then once an opportunity arises, take it and see what happens. Next question is from Kelsey. Do you ever think you'll go back to live in the U.S. again? That's a fun question. I didn't even think I was going to be here in the U.S. this long for now. Kind of depends. If I get tired of traveling and I don't find a place that I would like to call home, there's just so many other countries in the world I could live in, but I can see myself also getting tired of not speaking local languages and wanting to come back to something more familiar. I could see myself coming back to live in like the west coast of the U.S. so I can go like do sporty, outdoorsy people things, which I don't really do, but I would like to do. I could go hiking more often and go skiing, which would be pretty cool. Next question. Do you ever travel alone? And if you have as a woman, where would you avoid traveling again if you had a bad experience? Well, one, pay attention, I travel alone all the time. But two, I don't think that there's any place in this world I would ever avoid traveling to again, because you should never write off an entire country just because of one bad experience, in my personal opinion. I've had plenty of bad experiences with specific people, and they're assholes and should not have done what they did to me, but that doesn't mean that I would write off an entire country or place or destination. Next question from April, which is, as a female solo traveler, how do you manage or react to catcalling or other forms of street harassment based on all of your travels around the world? Can you say that this is universal? Yeah, so in the same line of thought, yes, I do have bad experiences with people on the roads unfortunately often. It should never happen, but it does happen. And it can be anything from catcalling, or people following me, or people, grabbing, they'll grab at your bum, or, touch your boob. I hate the, South Asian, boob brush when they walk past you. Ugh, it's so weird. I've had people literally just grab me and start trying to make out with me and do whatever things. Luckily, I've never been raped, so let's keep it that way. But so, with all these things, it's very dependent on the situation. The bum grabs and stuff, the bum grabs and boob brushes are really hard to figure out who did it in that moment, so I have a lot of trouble responding, and as anyone who's been harassed will know, sometimes your mind can just freeze in that moment, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know where it came from, and you just can't process fast enough. So a lot of the time I do just freeze. I'm learning to react more quickly, but yeah, it takes time. It's really shocking. It's hard to respond to. Catcalling, I'll usually just ignore. They're just trying to get attention. It doesn't, like, ruin my day. Fuck it. And people who actually grab me and do stuff to me, I hit them because they should be hit. And ideally, like, I would have a knife to chop their balls off, but alas, that would be bloody, and then my travel clothes would be dirty. But I would totally do it if I could. And so, in terms of how universal all this is, yeah, I would say that harassment is pretty universal. I've had people harass me on literally every continent, although I do think that in places where men and women are more culturally separate, it is much more of a problem, because the men just don't know how to interact with the women properly. And so, in places like the US, I get a lot of catcalling and people just being, like, weird when they talk to you, versus in more conservative places like Pakistan, I'll get more people, like, doing creepy touches or being really, really uncomfortable way earlier than they normally would be in other places where there's more integration between genders. But, yay, harassment is everywhere. It doesn't matter. It's really awful. Men, teach each other to be nicer, please. This is really quite tiring. Next question from Lutfala. Lutfala? Maybe Lutfala. Which is, the major apprehension of mine is going totally bankrupt after traveling around just in 2 countries. What do I do then? Start from the beginning? Like I said, it's important to always have a backup plan or some kind of buffer money that you can fall back on. And it is good to have a plan of what you would do if you went bankrupt. That is to say, have ideas of jobs that you could try and work, places you could go where you can save a bit of money and live a bit more cheaply, and yeah, have some kind of plan B. It seems like I'm careless and have no idea what's going on most of the time, which is kind of true, but I usually do have some kind of backup plan in mind, and I always have savings that I can fall back on in case of an emergency. Next question from Nina. Does living on a tight budget stress you out? She says she traveled once for 6 weeks and was stressed to save or stay under $50 a day. And she can't imagine doing that long term. Yeah, totally. Living on a budget freaks me out. There are days where, like, I'll spend more than my $15 to $25 a day budget, and I will just be so stressed for the rest of the day. It'll be like, crap. I shouldn't have drank, like, 3 coffees. Why did I even do that? I didn't need that. I'm supposed to be saving money. I'm going to be broke on the road in the middle of nowhere. What do I do? And then I have to calm myself down and remind myself that it's just one day. You can spend less money on other days. You are making money at this point. And also, the most important thing to remind yourself is that it sounds really ridiculous, but it is just money, and if you really had a good time spending the money on whatever, I think it's worth it. It's okay to splurge sometimes on things that really bring you joy in life. You're traveling to have experiences and to enjoy yourself and to explore the world, and if sometimes that means being irresponsible with money, screw it. Enjoy it. Don't do that every day, though, because then you'll go broke and then you'll be doomed. Everything in moderation. Next question from Natam. For long-term travelers, how do you mentally stimulate yourself to feel accomplished and productive? This is fun. I do think it's super important to be stimulating your brain in some way, aside from just, like, seeing new things, because the longer you travel, the less you're kind of actively using your brain on things, aside from just processing stuff around you. So some things that I recommend to people is to constantly try to learn a new skill. Maybe that's photography, so you can take cool photos of the places you're visiting, or learning a new language, whether it be the one in the place where you're traveling, or it's something on Duolingo. Duolingo is like 1 million different languages. Just pick one. You can learn Klingon. That's stimulating. Reading a lot of books, and not just, like, the shitty Danielle Steele books that are on the bookshelves of every hostel. Like, those will not stimulate your brain. Read something slightly more complicated. For me, I stimulate my mind by blogging. Blogging is a constant challenge that is also, at this point, profitable, which is nice. But blogging kind of kept my brain active and gave me purpose that I was working towards, even when just traveling around with no specific purpose in mind. So I think it's really important to have some kind of hobby that will keep you active and keep you functional while traveling. Next question from Kaylin. There's a question from Kaylin and from Samantha, and they're basically the same. How often do you come home, and do you have a home base to chill out in for more than a minute in between? And Samantha says, yeah, do you see yourself staying in one place like you are now more frequently? And so the answer is, yeah, it's pretty nice. Before this last long stretch of 5 or 6 months, I guess, I came back to the U.S. maybe 3 times, 4 times, usually for family matters. There were deaths or people were sick, and I came back to be with them and be a good family person. Some of those I publicized, some of those I didn't. I try to keep personal life separate when possible. But it is nice to be able to kind of hang out in a spot for an extended period of time. Like, this period in the U.S. has been really good for kind of rejuvenating and getting a little bit healthier and just reconnecting with people that are important to me. And even when I'm traveling in more further flung locales, I will usually have places that I can kind of go and hang out in for maybe not months, but weeks at a time. So for example, I spent probably more than a month or 2 in Kolkata in India. I just like it there. There's a guest house that I like to stay in that's super cheap, so I don't have to worry about staying there, and just weird stuff happens all the time. I stay in Lahore quite often when I go to Pakistan. I have a good friend there who lets me bum in his apartment for a long period of time and only drives me crazy 75% of the time I see Wakas. And so it makes it comfortable to kind of hang out there and stay and recharge batteries and just relax for a little bit. So yeah, especially when I've been traveling for about 3 years at this point, you have to slow down at some point. You can't constantly be bum, 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 do things all the time, or else your brain will just explode, or you'll just collapse and die and burn out. And I would prefer not to collapse and die, just saying. So that's the end of my social media questions. I can go for a bit longer and answer a few more questions. So let me see what questions I have here that I can answer. Wow, that's a lot of questions. I've kind of been looking at what people have been sharing, but I also get distracted. Please save this. Yeah, sure. What inspired you to travel the way that you do? That's a fun one. The next one is all caps. How you got the money to travel. Doesn't have to be in caps, dude. I can see it regardless. Backtracking. What inspired you to travel the way that you do? I like traveling to kind of less common destinations just because when you're surrounded by hordes of tourists from other countries, it kind of dilutes the experience that you have in that location. It detracts from it, and I find that local people are also often much nicer and more excited to engage with foreigners when they're not used to having loads of tourists around. And so, I hate the word, but it feels more authentic when you go to places with less tourists, because there's less people trying to craft an experience for you. And you can just see how people live without having to look through a veil of tourism. And as for backpacking, that's just how much money I have, man. I don't have the money to travel fancy, so I don't. It's pretty straightforward. Next question. Can you save this video? Yeah, I will. What was your age when you started traveling? I probably went on my first international trip when I was 1 to go to England so that my family could show off my ugly baby body to people. My first trip without my parents was with my friend Barry Hill when we were, I don't know, how old were we when we went to Guatemala? Maybe 16 or 17. That was the first time, it was just the 2 of us, and her cousins. There were 3 of us. We were totally responsible for doing all of our own things, and I was like, yeah, parents, I'm gonna prove to you that I can do this traveling thing, and it was totally a disaster. We were doing, there's a farming thing that you can do called woofing, and I signed us up for a farm that turned out to just be some rich old dude with an estate who just wanted to have people to drink and play chess with, which was fine for 3 days, and then that got boring, and the room that we slept in was filled with animal poop, and it leaked when it rained, so we had to leave that place a month earlier than we thought. But it worked itself out in the end. It was a good experience, and clearly I didn't die, so it was fine. But yeah, that was probably when I was 16 or 17. Someone says, what advice do you have for upcoming bloggers? Be persistent. It takes a lot of time, and don't write stuff that a million people have written before. No one is going to read something that you wrote if 10,000 other people wrote it better than you longer ago. Find a niche that people haven't covered and write about it. Don't waste time trying to reinvent the wheel. It's not going to work, and people on the internet don't read stuff, periods. Also, just probably be a vlogger. It's better. Yeah, I see questions about Pakistan. That's very, specific, though. I'll message you later, Pirasane, because I like you. Let's see. Oh, man, there's, a tourism discussion going on in the comments. When are you going to visit India? I'll come back soon. When are you going to Mumbai? I've been there, but... La 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 la, birds sound so nice. They do sound nice. Oh my gosh, there's so much tourism discussion. Is couch surfing safe for females? Okay, question. Yes, I think so. Unfortunately, I do know that couch surfing has kind of turned into a hookup app, and that is to say, hi, come sleep on my couch, but if you don't sex me, you can't sleep on my couch. And I think that's disgusting and totally destroys the spirit of couch surfing, which is very frustrating because it is a really good tool. I think that girls should be fine with couch surfing. You just have to be slightly more careful than men might have to. If you see any bad reviews on someone's couch surfing profile, don't stay with them. Oftentimes, people will be afraid to say something, and so they might not even leave a bad review in the first place. But if you see anything negative, don't do it. It's better to just stay in a hotel, I think. Unless it's something ridiculous like their orange juice didn't taste good, and then that's just on the reviewer. But I don't think that you should be afraid to use couch surfing. I think you should absolutely use it. I've stayed with hosts who are wonderful. I've met a lot of good people through it. You can also use the hangout function, or just use it to message people and meet for a coffee. Or meet somewhere public and somewhere safe, and if they're super cool, then stay with them. You can use it as a, earlier vetting system. Don't be afraid to use couch surfing just because a few freaky dudes fucked it all up. I have my best friend trolling me asking about buying a mule. We'll buy a mule this summer. It's okay. Let's see. The famous question, pick between Pakistan and India. I refuse to answer that question. I really hate that question more than any other question, actually. I don't think that you should pick between things, because that's ridiculous. So Nico says, do you experience travel fatigue? Yeah, definitely. Not maybe to the extent that I would want to come home, whatever home is now, but there are definitely times where I'm just tired and I see stuff that at other times would make me really excited. I just don't care. I'll see some nice building, or I'll see some cool ritual, and I'll just be like, Netflix is cooler than this. And usually that's just me being in a bad mood or being tired and just needing to have a proper meal and a hot shower and just lie in bed for 2 days and read a book or watch a lot of bad TV. And that's okay. If you're on the road for a while, or even if you're not on the road for a while and just need a down day, it's totally fine to just sit and do nothing for a day. Some people really like to sightsee all the time, and you can't sustain that for forever, and it's more expensive, and, traveling is just as much about atmosphere as it is about checking stuff off a box. So on those days when I feel really fatigued, I might just, get a book and go sit somewhere chill and just, be creepy and watch people while I read my book. Another good question. Don't you feel lonely sometimes? And if yes, how do you tackle that? Yeah, for sure. Usually it comes in around bedtime when I'm lying in the dark pondering dark things, like whether or not I should be doing what I was doing in the first place. And I miss having people to kind of unwind with and discuss things and have chats with, and just having people who you can talk to where you don't have to explain just all the little background details of your life, hello, I am me, I am 27, I have one brother, la 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 la. So I definitely get lonely sometimes, and then usually I will distract myself from it. I'll read a book, or I'll just watch like I said, really crappy TV, something really trashy, like Gossip Girl or something, where I can just get lost in the lives of someone else and focus on that for a little bit and kind of distract from my own thoughts. And then if I'm getting really lonely during the daytime, I'll try and go out and meet people, or I'll have a good conversation with someone, or I'll like message people on Instagram. That's really helpful, just to have some kind of social contact with someone who knows what I'm doing and wants to talk about it. But loneliness is inevitable. You can get lonely while staying at home also. It's not just a traveling thing, as you probably know. How has traveling improved you? I think it's made me more sensitive to hospitality, and now I recognize the importance of helping people when I can, because the number of times that someone has saved me just like when I have no idea what's going on and everything is falling apart around me, and then they're like, hello, you look like you're doomed, can I help you? And they save my life, and I make a friend, or I have a good time, and just that's super important, and that's something that we can bring to people all over the world. I know hospitality is ingrained in some cultures, but it's definitely not a thing everywhere in the world, and so I'm trying to change that in my personal life and help people where I can, how I can, in whatever way I can. Yeah, day to day, everywhere, not just while traveling. And so that's important, I think. When did you start traveling alone? That was in 2018, basically. It was when I started my solo travels, and that was fun. There's a post about that on my blog. Y'all should read it if you haven't read it. Please save this live feed in your profile. Yes, yes, yes. Is it advisable traveling with a 2-year-old frequently? Their immune system will get used to it, lol. How many countries have you covered to date? I don't know, maybe like 50 or 60, but I don't like counting countries because you can spend a lot of time in a country and it still only counts as one. So I think the quality of the time that you spend there is more important than the number of countries that you go to. I'll answer like 2 more questions because it's been like an hour. Does someone need to have travel insurance? Yes, you should. Someone's asking, how many countries have you been to? Oh my gosh, what are your thoughts on Pakistan and India's border issues? That's not related to quitting your job to travel. Please just read, like, legitimate news sources instead. This is a fun last one. Or no, there's 2 more. Okay, fine, last 2 questions. Do you at times feel like taking a break from social media? Absolutely. Social media drives me crazy. I don't know how I haven't lost my mind from it already. I think I actually have lost my mind from it already. It drives me crazy that I have to reveal my life to people on the internet sometimes, because sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes I feel a lot of pressure to do cool stuff, and I don't feel like it at the time. I've been stressed being in the U.S. the last few months, because I know that the people who follow me don't think it's as cool as the places that I normally travel to. And so it's really uncomfortable to have that layer of knowledge that people don't like what you're doing at that point in time, and that your livelihood depends on that. So social media sucks sometimes, and yes, I definitely want to quit it. And so, final question, because this is a nice one. What has it been like working for nonprofits like OneSite, and how has it changed the way you view your traveling? In case y'all don't know what that person is talking about, OneSite is an NGO that does charitable eye clinics for people in countries where they can't afford it, or places where they can't afford it. And so that was nice because I was getting to a point where my travels were feeling very narcissistic and shallow, and I realized, I was feeling like I was just contributing to mass tourism, which we've all seen in the articles is kind of like a scourge on the world. And I felt like I didn't have purpose and wasn't actually making the world any better than it was before I started traveling. And so working with an NGO that is doing good charitable work in places and having an actual impact on people made me realize that there's multiple ways to see the world and experience things and meet people while also doing good. And so, yeah, I haven't actively changed the way I travel yet because of it, but it made me realize that I have other avenues, if and when I get tired of blogging, that I can still continue to travel while contributing to people's well-being in this world, also without just being like a voluntourist that just builds crappy schools in places and makes things worse. So, yeah, working with NGOs has helped me to kind of realize the potential of people to do good, even in countries that aren't their own. So that's been nice. And so, yeah, that's like pretty much it. There's so many other things to read through. I'm just going to stop it here because it's been an hour, and I originally meant to just do this for half an hour, but what is time anyway? So, again, thank you all for watching and checking all this stuff out. Ooh, Instagram just said I have 23 seconds remaining. Okay, so thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to all these questions. I'll try and save it somewhere. Thank you to Eagle Creek for sponsoring all this stuff. They make super awesome gear. You should check it out. I'm very excited to use it. Yeah, if you want to do cool things in this world, quit your job, find your unknown, don't be afraid to do it. Just take the step, you'll figure it out, have confidence in yourself. I have 3